featuring the creator and lead host of Clutch Crew Sports, Zach.
Unfortunately, Eric is an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, and he went through a pretty rough postseason watching my Portland Trail Blazers pretty well dismantle his team. So,
dang. Okay, I did not realize we were going to go into that.
You sure you didn't lose your train of thought by looking at this picture here?
For those of you who don't know, Zach really likes Alex Morgan.
Featuring Nate, NFL and college football co-host. I don't think Indiana's very good, just being straight up, so I think it's pretty fair.
Indiana's getting triggered
cover.
right now. You just triggered the whole state.
And I forgot to change it on here.
Oh, okay.
But since it's here, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to defend
it.
I do think Denver's a very average team. I'm going to stick with my open pick.
All right, guys. Today, we're going to have a fun list of topics planned to talk about. And we finally are moving on from just talking about the NFL in our topics episode. So while we do have an NFL subject, we've got a college football subject, and we've also got a college basketball subject. So this is going to be the first time in a long time that we've talked about college basketball. I think really the only time we ever talked about college basketball was way back in June about Kerry Blackshear's graduate transfer decision. We kept, like every episode, we kept coming on with some new rumors and new updates about Kerry Blackshear. But today we're going to talk about college basketball and a little bit of a preview for the season, because obviously it kicks off on the day that we're recording this on November the 5th. But we're going to talk about some stories that we're going to be following this season. I'm going to give some predictions, some of my thoughts, and then some of the conference winners, and just some general takeaways from what we should expect from college basketball. And then the other topic I've got planned is how far can San Francisco go? So San Francisco, obviously, they're the only undefeated team right now, but how high is their ceiling? Are they going to win the NFC? Are they going to win the Super Bowl? Are they going to go out in the first round of playoffs? What's going to be San Francisco's limit? And then Nate is going to be talking about Willie Taggart firing, just happened this past weekend, and who is going to be FSU's next head coach and the whole dilemma that's going on with that right now. And we do want to give an update to the Subvember count. So as of right now, Eric is still in the lead for Subvember with 5, and nobody else has any yet. So we're early in the month, only 5 days here, but Eric does have the lead. He's been averaging 1 subscriber a day. That's pretty good. But I still think I can end up catching him. So I'm gonna be working hard on that. I know Nate is too as well. So we both want to win that.
Oh yeah.
So I do want to credit this first topic here, how far can San Francisco go, to my friend Alexa, who's actually a 49ers fan. So she wanted to hear something about the 49ers, so that's what gave me this idea for this topic. So we do this a lot. The last episode we had Jackson want us to talk about Carolina and Cam Newton versus Kyle Allen. So if you ever want to message us about a topic idea, feel free to do so. We would love to. We love interacting with you guys. And so let's get started here with San Francisco. So I don't know about you guys, but I'll just cut to the chase here. If I had to pick a Super Bowl winner right now, I would pick San Francisco. I think they're the most complete team right now in the NFL. And the reason I think that is because they have, I think, probably the best defense in the NFL right now. As you can see up there in the top left, their top right is their defensive line. And they've spent so many first-round picks on this defensive line. Every year San Francisco is drafting a defensive lineman, I was like, dang, they're just like stacking up at that position. But now we're finally seeing the benefits of having a great defensive line. And they play really well as a unit. Up at the top left there is their fiery defensive coordinator. They always show him on the sidelines as like as you see right there in that picture, just really amped up and wanting to cheer his team on, really energetic. And he was actually a member of the Jaguars coaching staff too. It was interesting. I didn't know about that, but it's too bad they couldn't keep him in-house. But so when you look at the 49ers, you want to look at the teams that they're going to be having to beat on their way to go to a Super Bowl. I think it's safe to say that they've locked up a playoff spot now. I mean, it would take a massive collapse for them not to make the playoffs at this point, and they're probably going to have home field advantage either throughout the NFC playoffs or at least until the NFC Championship game, because I find it hard that they're not going to make a first-round bye with the way that their record is. But the teams the toughest teams I think they're going to have to go up against are going to be New Orleans, coming out of the NFC South. Out of the NFC North, probably Green Bay, Minnesota I'd also put up there. NFC East, Philly and Dallas probably, might make the playoffs. Both of them might make the playoffs. But I have a hard feeling of that, actually. I don't think so. And then in the NFC West, their own division, Seattle and the LA Rams. But if I had to just pick the NFC playoffs right now, I would put San Francisco 1, New Orleans 2, Green Bay 3, and then Dallas 4. And then the playoff teams, I would put Seattle at 5, Minnesota at 6. Yeah, so the playoff teams that are going to have to go up against are going to be Green Bay, really, and New Orleans. And I just don't think New Orleans is going to get over that, bump in the playoffs. It just seems like in the playoffs, New Orleans, they are favored to win, and something goes wrong for them. Like in Minnesota, they had that Minnesota Miracle, the refs, and the LA Rams game. I just think something's going to go wrong for New Orleans. I don't think they have as good of a team as San Francisco does. And Green Bay, I think, is a really troubled team. I don't think Aaron Rodgers has been playing as great as people think he has this year. And we still don't know about that defense. They've been playing good, but obviously their defense isn't as good as San Francisco's defense. And I do think San Francisco's got a better running game. And I actually do expect Jimmy G to be a reliable quarterback in the playoffs. And another thing about Jimmy G, too, is, he's got a great winning percentage as a starting quarterback. I know it's not, all due to him, but still, he's rarely lost games. It's just interesting that he's lost so few games up to this point in his career, and he's not really talked about as an elite quarterback. He doesn't have a great statistical season so far because really it's just been the defense and the running game. But you saw last week against Arizona where they needed Jimmy G to win the game. And I think tied to Jimmy G is their head coach, Kyle Shanahan, here. I would actually say Kyle Shanahan is probably the best offensive-minded coach in the league. I think he's better than Sean McVay is. Even though they're both, young and Sean McVay's gone to a Super Bowl, I just think that Kyle Shanahan has a better background of coaching, and I think he's doing more with less with this San Francisco team. So it's taken him a couple years to get to this point. They had a little bit of a rebuild the past couple seasons, but it's all showing off now. And that's the thing with rebuilds sometimes. It's not always where you gradually increase your wins from year to year. Sometimes you just have a breakout year, and that's what they're having this year. So combined with that great defense that I think is real, I don't think the defense is fake. And combined with the great offensive mind of Kyle Shanahan, I think this team has the potential to do a lot. I just don't see a team that can beat them right now. I think having a home field advantage in the playoffs is going to be a huge thing for them. Usually in the playoffs, it usually ends up being either the 1 seed or the 2 seed to go on to the Super Bowl. It's hard to win the wild card weekend and the divisional weekend and the conference championship weekend. And then if you do all that stuff, get to the Super Bowl and win is hard to do. So I think they're set up good to get that bye. I think they're good to have home field advantage. And I just think they've proven to me a lot this season. I think more than Green Bay has even. I didn't have high expectations for Green Bay, but I still just don't fully trust Green Bay. And Aaron Rodgers he's just not the kind of quarterback that tends to lead his team out of the NFC. I mean, how many times have they lost in the NFC Championship game? Like, so many times they've lost in the playoffs. And Dallas, I think, isn't talented enough. I think Dallas is really benefiting from a weak division. In the NFC East, I think, they've had an easy schedule at this point. They haven't beaten good teams, and they lost to the Jets, which is looking worse and worse as each week goes on. And New Orleans is going to be the toughest test, I believe, but it's really going to be a benefit for San Francisco to not have to play New Orleans. I mean, we obviously don't know that this is a fact yet, but I'm just going under that assumption. So New Orleans on the road is going to be a much easier game, I think, for San Francisco to win. And I really do think this defense is going to be able to get after Drew Brees. And I don't know. I just don't see Drew Brees pulling out a Super Bowl run this season. With his thumb injury and all, I mean, I know he looked good last week, but unless something major happens to San Francisco, I'm going to have to say that they're going to win the NFC and probably win the Super Bowl, honestly. Well, I'm not as confident in that regard, but I'm more confident that they're going to win the NFC. So, Alexa, you're listening to this, you probably like what I have to say. So, but I'm not just saying this to make you happy. This is what I truly think right now. But Nate, I want to see if you are along the same lines as me, or you think that they could be just overrated.
I'm kind of thinking along the same lines as you here. I definitely don't think they're overrated. They've been getting a lot of hype, like, as a undefeated team, but I think to this point in the season, to still be undefeated kind of says a lot. It's not like week 5 anymore. A lot of teams make it to week 5 undefeated and then, don't really accomplish anything in the postseason. But I think this 49ers roster is pretty solid from top to bottom, especially that D line they got with like Nick Bosa and all those guys have been like kind of stepping up there. I just think they're not super flashy, I feel like. Like what you were saying about Jimmy Garoppolo, like he hasn't been putting up like huge numbers like Russell Wilson has, or Deshaun Watson or anything like that. But he's been definitely doing enough to help them win. And I mean, there's a reason that he's only lost a couple of games as an NFL starter. Like he does enough to, help the team kind of move the ball well enough and get done what they got to get done. So I think him plus Kyle Shanahan running the show on the offense, and then the addition of Emmanuel Sanders kind of pushes this team into, I think they're definitely in contender territory. I think looking at the NFC right now, I kind of agree. I don't really know who is that big of a threat to them, except maybe, honestly, the Seahawks, I think right now are kind of dangerous just the way that Russell Wilson's been playing. He's kind of been, honestly, like pretty insane lately. Saw those 5 touchdowns on Sunday. Like, the Seahawks top to bottom aren't, I don't think, a championship caliber roster, but I think, you give them one game versus the 49ers late in December, the playoffs, they happen to get matched up there, they could potentially do some damage. But other than that, I mean, I guess the Saints get Drew Brees back, so we'll see how they look. They'll probably take a step forward. That's really who I would say is a challenge to them out of the NFC right now. Other than that, I can't think of anyone else that really scares me too much either. I mean, the Packers have been great, but you saw like how low they can go in that game Sunday versus the Chargers. Their floor is super low, and I think the Niners are very capable of playing a similar type of game against them in terms of like, defense, stopping Aaron Rodgers and all that. So yeah, kind of short answer, like I'm pretty much the same thinking as you. I think they definitely got what it takes to get to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. Winning it, I think it's definitely possible. Probably gonna play maybe the Patriots or I think they're probably a clear front runner from the AFC. Maybe the Ravens, something like that. We'll give them the challenge, but yeah, I think they're definitely a contender. Definitely not overrated, I would say.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on now to our next topic about Florida State, and I'll let Nate take the lead on this one.
Yeah, this is kind of a situation we've been watching really all year of college football. What would Florida State do after kind of the really bad season they had last year, which kind of obviously we all know how that turned out. This weekend, or this Sunday actually, FSU fired Willie Taggart after 1 and about 3/4 seasons as the head coach at FSU. Finished with a 9-12 record, which kind of a small sample size, only 2 seasons, but obviously that's pretty bad, especially for a big time program like FSU. Everyone kind of expected his first year to be bad, just with the way that Jimbo Fisher left the program, kind of left it in shambles. So a bad season last year was, not what people were looking for, but it wasn't necessarily, fire-worthy, just because the program was in such a bad state then. But coming in this year and not really making any steps forward, not really winning any of the games that FSU would be expected to win, it's kind of what did Willie Taggart in. I got a couple stats that show kind of the mess that this program's in right now, which is really what I'm here to talk about. I mean, kind of known Willie Taggart's been on the hot seat most of this season. So him being fired wasn't too much of a surprise, but kind of what I want to talk about is more so how did FSU football get to this low point, and where do I think they should go from here? So kind of to start out with, this program to me is really in a bad spot. It's kind of shocking, honestly, when you think about it, that FSU won a national championship as recently as 2013, and in 2014 they went back to the college football playoff as one of the top 4 teams in the country, and just 5 years later I believe they won 4 games. They're 4-5 right now.
Yeah, they're at risk to not make a bowl game, I think, which they've got the longest streak, I know.
Well, that streak was snapped last year. But yeah, you're right. They had like 38 games or 38 years in a row with a bowl game.
Oh, I thought they had still gone to a bowl last year.
But last year they didn't. They had a losing record. But the year before, when Jimbo left, they went to I think it was like the walk-on, like Independence Bowl or something like that.
Yeah. One
of those like bowls that like ESPN just invented.
Yeah, I see this.
Yeah, the 2017.
Wow.
They're really at a low point for that program. They had all those great years. Bobby Bowden, obviously. Jimbo Fisher did a good job until really that season he left. That was kind of a down year, and then to kind of bail on the team right there, that kind of, I think to me, is what's really set this program back. Kind of a proud tradition there. They're a big time destination for Florida high school football stars, which Florida, along with Texas, probably the best like recruiting grounds in the country. So normally, if you're a powerhouse in the state, you should have no problem fielding a talented team. Maybe not a national championship every year, but there's no reason why a team like FSU should be, only winning 4 or 5 games a year with the talent in this state. So there's definitely, something is wrong with your program when, you're able to pull 4-star, 5-star recruits, keep them at home in their home state. There's so much like talent in this area that even if you only get, 25% of it to come to FSU, like you should have a great team. So what I'm pointing to, and obviously I'm not, an FSU insider. I don't, I'm not in that locker room or anything, but just as an outsider's perspective, I think FSU has a big culture problem right now. I got some stats, just kind of from ESPN, just a couple little nuggets here, but this season they're averaging 8.9 penalties per game, which ranks 126th in all of college football, which it's the ranking they had was like the least penalties to be ranked number 1. So 126th, there's only like 5 teams. There's like 131 teams in D1 right now. So it's only 5 teams that get more penalties per game than FSU, which just shows they're undisciplined. They're getting unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. They're fighting. They've had, they've lined up for punts incorrectly, gotten 5-yard penalties there, which that's just stuff that really should not be an issue in any level of college football. That's like just showing up to your meetings, showing up to practice and focusing. If you can't execute a punt right, that's really a low point. There's really something wrong there. And then in addition, they've blown 5 fourth quarter leads this season. They've been outscored 99-55 in the fourth quarter, which also shows possibly lack of conditioning. You get to that stage in the game, guys are getting tired. They're not making the right tackles. They're not, maybe remembering their routes, stuff like that when fatigue sets in. So that's a possibility, which again is, you're not going hard enough in the weight room. Maybe the coaching isn't doing a good enough job with conditioning, something like that. Or they're just not, again, they're not disciplined. They're not finishing the game out. You saw it, they almost blew a lead to Louisiana Monroe. They beat them 45-44 in overtime, which again, they were paid probably over $1 million to come to Tallahassee to get beat. And if you can barely beat a team like that, you really shouldn't be. That's really like, I'm trying to think like the words here, like
a low point, or
like if you want to be a top 3 team in the state, consider yourself one of the big 3. Like you can't be like barely winning games like that. You have to be beating the teams you're supposed to beat, and just being overall more competitive, which FSU has not done in the last 2 years. And personally, I'm kind of sympathetic to Willie Taggart. I mean, he inherited a bad situation. I don't think a lot of these culture problems are his fault. I mean, I think they're kind of starting to arise during Jimbo's last season in Tallahassee, and then for him to leave the program like that. I think it was a little bit quick for Willie Taggart to kind of try and turn the program around. It was in such a bad state when he got there, and we didn't really get a chance to recruit all of his guys in. Maybe don't fully know the whole situation, so I'm a little bit sympathetic to his situation here. But I think it's pretty clear that FSU wasn't going to do anything this year, so I guess there's not really any harm in firing him and trying to get going on your head coaching search, which kind of brings me to the next topic. Where does FSU go from here? Obviously, they got to find a new head coach. So there's been a few potential names that I've heard in the past week. The biggest one is Bob Stoops, former head coach of Oklahoma. He retired a couple years back. Right now, I believe he was going to be one of the head coaches / general managers for one of the XFL teams.
Yeah, he is.
Whichever team it was, it's kind of escaping me right now.
I think Dallas Renegades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. The Dallas team. Um,
Either
but
them or
obviously,
Houston, I think. Yeah.
yeah, one of those Texas teams. I'm sure it's kind of like his geographical area. Um, It'd be a good fit. But obviously, head coach of Florida State Seminoles would probably be a better paying, obviously more prestigious job, I would imagine. So I don't think if FSU came calling, they probably shouldn't have too hard of a time getting him back into the game. I think that would be a pretty solid hire. Obviously, the big name that the boosters and the fans would like to see. He had good success at Oklahoma. Um, that team always had good offenses while he was there, and he's still only 59. A lot of people have brought up his age, just because he's retired, which, generally kind of indicates maybe a guy's not really interested in coaching anymore. But the fact that he's been with the XFL lately, he's still younger than a lot of guys like Nick Saban. Some of those guys are at least 5 or 6 years older than him, so he's got some more gas in the tank. Sounds like he would be open to coaching again. I don't know if specifically if FSU, if he would be open to that, but obviously they would like to pay him. They'd have the money to pay him, hopefully. The other name I've heard is Lane Kiffin. I don't know how serious they're going to pursue him. That's just a name I've heard kind of floated around some media outlets as a rumor. He's obviously been doing some pretty good things with another in-state school in FAU. Obviously, it should be a little bit easier to recruit guys to FSU instead of Florida Atlantic. There's a pretty big jump in those programs. So I think Kiffin obviously would like to do it. He'd like to get back to a big name school. He's definitely one of those guys who enjoys the status and kind of like, the attention, whatever that comes with coaching a big time program. You've seen how he is on social media, likes to kind of stir the pot a little bit. So I think he would jump at the chance to go coach FSU if he were offered. I don't know how seriously the FSU administration is going to take that, but yeah, Kiffin and Stoops probably the two biggest names I've seen on Twitter. If I was an FSU fan, I'd obviously like to see Stoops more than Kiffin just because he has a better track record. Those are probably the two biggest names. And then outside of those guys, I'm sure FSU will do their due diligence on some Group of 5 coaches, such as like Mike Norvell from Memphis. He's been a pretty popular name for many of the head coaching vacancies this season and this past offseason. So I'm sure he'll get a look. Brett Venables, the defensive coordinator for Clemson, who knows if he would leave, if he wants to be a head coach, if he would leave Clemson. Obviously, he's got a great gig going there as a defensive coordinator for a team that's always seeming to produce a top 10 defense. But I'm sure they'll take a look at him as well.
If I could just interrupt you real quick here, I just took away Stoops' picture because a couple hours ago Stoops made a comment about this, and so FSU said that Stoops was on their coaching list, but Stoops just said that he's not going to coach at FSU, so he said he's not on their list. So that's honestly kind of an embarrassing look when a team says like he's on our list of candidates, and then he just flat out says I'm not going to coach there. So, and then also Urban Meyer's done the same. So Urban Meyer's not going to be coaching at FSU.
Yeah.
So it's one of those pie in the sky, I think, things there. So
yeah. So
narrowing the list.
Glad you pointed that out because I missed that earlier. So yeah, it's gonna be. I think it's a lot of people. When I heard the Bob Stoops thing, people were saying it could be announced as early as this weekend, which I did not believe. That seems like a very fast turnaround. I think whoever FSU ends up hiring is gonna be probably at least a few weeks, probably around the end of the season, I would imagine. Just because you kind of gotta go through candidates, kind of really. Because I think the big thing for FSU is this head coaching hire is going to be a huge moment for the FSU program. I think personally, whoever they hire could make or break the situation at FSU, at least for the next decade, just because when you look at what they're paying for Willie Taggart's buyout, he's going to be owed $17 million, which is the remainder of his contract, which that's the second highest buyout ever behind Charlie Weiss's $19 million from Notre Dame. So that's just an absurd amount of money to pay a guy who's not going to be your coach for the next, whatever it is, I think 4 years, or I believe there's 4 years left on his contract, something like that. But
Yeah.
kind of, you know what I mean? That's a lot of money to pay someone that's not even your coach. And now, obviously, if you're FSU, you want to attract a big name. They're going to demand a big contract as well. So you can't, if you're FSU, you can't afford to be in the situation again 2 years from now. You can't afford to buy out another coach. Whoever you got, they pretty much got, until he's fired. And I mean, until he's, through that contract, unless something comes up and they can fire him with cause and not have to pay out the rest of that balance.
Stretching for something like that. He's got to do something illegal, like
yeah, or like a recruiting violation or something like
yeah.
that. Which obviously you're not really hoping for that either. You want a guy who's going to come in and win games. So yeah, if FSU gets stuck with another stinker at head coach who's not winning enough games, they're going to be in a tough spot for some years. So I think they're really going to have to proceed with this search pretty well, do their due diligence on every coach and not just make the splashiest big name hire, because if they went with a guy like Kiffin, you can't afford to fire him in 3 years if he doesn't perform. So I think it's gonna be really interesting for FSU here, because their program's already pretty close to rock bottom right now, for a major school like that. And I don't know how much worse they could get, but they're certainly not going to get better anytime soon if they mess up this head coaching search. So they got to find a guy who can come in there and change the culture around, kind of focus on that stuff first, recruit a couple of good classes, and then hopefully the results will come on the field. I think FSU definitely, it should be not an easy turnaround, but you know what I mean? They've got the means and the resources to turn this around. They just got to go out there and find their guy and get some things switched up here.
Yeah, so I'll talk briefly here about this situation. So to me, it's kind of crazy that Taggart isn't having good success here, because he was really known for being the coach at USF, which is where I go to school now. And he had 2 really good seasons at USF where the school was ranked in the top 25, winning their bowl games and such. And he became the big name from a small school that could go to a big school and turn it around. And he tried that at Oregon for 1 year, and then he left Oregon for FSU. So it was boom, boom, boom. He's moving all over the place, going from Tampa to Eugene to Tallahassee. It just seems like he's been on the move too much to really establish a recruiting base, a group of players that have grown up together and become seniors, like Quentin Flowers had done at USF to lead them to a good season. And also too, coming back to Florida, a lot of people thought it was going to be a good thing, since that's where he made his name at USF. He'd be back in his home state. But it's shocking that he hasn't performed well at all and hasn't been able to at least have FSU be 500 in conference play. So I'm kind of curious what's gonna happen with him. Honestly, I wouldn't be upset if he came back to USF and they got rid of Charlie Strong. So that things might come full circle around. But I did look up some of the most likely candidates for head coach. So some other names that to think about that could be possibilities. Matt Campbell at Iowa State. It would have to be a sizable buyout though, because it's going to be a lot of money to lure him in, and that's a big money that they're 17 million. That's insane that a university has to pay a head coach. That's really insane. So, and then another, actually, you kind of got the wrong Stoops here, because I see Mark Stoops is on this list from Kentucky, who could leave to go to FSU, because obviously he's had success at Kentucky, which is hard to do. And then another name, PJ Fleck, but you can rule him out because he just re-signed Minnesota. Yeah. But the one that's interesting to me is Brent Venables at Clemson, the defensive coordinator there. He's been a huge part of Clemson's success. I just don't know if he'd be willing to leave Clemson to, he's got a nice gig there right now as their defensive coordinator, but that I think is who they should be targeting, because he seems like a solid coach to me. And then also in the process, you're weakening Clemson, so you're taking out your biggest rival in your conference. You're damaging them a little bit, and you're getting their guy as your head coach. So, I mean, it doesn't instantly make them favorites to beat Clemson or anything, but at least you gain an advantage on them. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. And then the Memphis coach, Mike Norville, he'd be interesting too. Some other American coaches coming up, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what FSU does here. But if I'll tell you this though, if they get this one wrong, I think they're in for a real recession, so to say, because we've seen top programs that are historically good, go on the decline. Can you imagine if they become the new Tennessee, where they go from a 10-year stretch of mediocrity, or Nebraska, even Texas for a while was down. Nebraska was another team. Miami, I think they've been having more success recently, but they had a dark period as well. So USC, I think, they could be the next one of those teams that Penn State for a while went dark. If they don't get this turned around soon, I think they're going to be the next dark team, powerhouse team that falls off the map. So we'll see what happens. But I have no personal connections to FSU, so I can't say I'm rooting too hard for them to turn it around. But we'll move on here to our final topic, which is college basketball. So I want to talk about, you'll see some pictures coming up, and they're just going to be what I talk about for college basketball. So the Florida Gators here is the first picture you see. Their team, obviously, they landed Kerry Blackshear. That was the guy that, we spent so much time talking about the rumors and stuff. And they got him on their team. They've also got a really good coach, I think. And I just really like this Florida team. I'm picking them to win the SEC over Kentucky, which might be a little bit controversial, but to me, Kentucky is just, they'll win a lot of games, but they're not gonna. There's just something about Kentucky that I'm just not feeling good about this year. I can't really explain it, but they're ranked number 2, but they are always a team of freshmen, and Florida's not going to be a team of freshmen. They've got guys who have gone through struggles before, but they also have won tournament games before too. So Florida's my pick to win the SEC. I don't think most people have them. I think most would have Kentucky, but I think Florida's a more complete team overall. And then the other picture here you see on the screen is of Cole Anthony of North Carolina. He's going to be their new freshman point guard. And I also have North Carolina winning the ACC, which most people would probably have Duke, but that one might be more split, half and half. But I really expect a lot from Cole Anthony. I think he's going to be the best point guard in the country this year. I think he's going to be a real high draft pick after this season. I think he's the real deal. And I think he's going to get North Carolina a lot of wins. I think he's going to lead them to winning the conference. So he's my guy that I'm really high on this year. I'm also really high on Blackshear and the Gators, but these are two teams that are definitely Final Four capabilities. Over here you see Cassius Winston for Michigan State. Michigan State's my pick to win the Big Ten, but I also would have to pick them to win the national championship just because they've got the experience. Senior point guard here, probably the best college basketball player, as a senior and stuff. So he's, I'm watching the screen right now. Last season, 291 assists. That's a Big Ten season record. He's only one of 3 Division I players with 18 plus points per game, 7 plus rebounds, or 7 plus assists per game, and 35% from the 3-point line. So those are some really good stats. He's going to be their leader on their team, and it's going to be tough, I think, in that conference. But still, if I had to pick one team, I mean, they are ranked number 1, so it's not like a crazy thing to say that they're going to win the national championship, but they're my preseason picks too. I actually picked them last year I can't remember if I picked them to win the champion. No, I didn't. I picked Tennessee, of course, to win the championship last year, but I picked them to get to the championship, and they came pretty close. They made it to the Final Four. They'd beaten Duke, which a lot of people didn't think they would be able to do. I actually thought they would, so I'm high in Michigan State, but I do think that they're not going to go undefeated or anything like that. They're going to lose a game or two, but I think that they're going to have the best season overall. And then a team here on the right, you see this got me cracking up when I saw it for the first time. Like, really? And this is kind of this I think embodies the problem with this team, this Memphis basketball team here. Obviously, they have got the best recruiting class from this last year, and everybody's all hyped up about James Wiseman and Penny Hardaway, their coach, and all these guys, RJ Hampton, all these guys on their team. Oh, Memphis. But and then you see this movie poster here with they're trying to be like the Avengers or something of Memphis basketball. It just, to me, is all a bunch of gimmicks and stuff. I'm not going to believe it till I see it. I think Memphis is really overrated. I don't have them winning the American. I've got Houston winning the American. They'll make the tournament, obviously, but the thing about Memphis last year that really stood out to me is they could not win road games. For whatever reason, they didn't get excited for them enough, or they didn't have the energy. The coach didn't inspire them. And I'm just, I'm a Tennessee fan, so I have no liking for Memphis at all. But, Penny Hardaway, he's the biggest joke I think there is. This might be controversial, but no, last year in the Tennessee-Memphis game, Tennessee was winning the game, and they won pretty easily by 10 or 12 points, I think. But anyways, in the game, there was a lot of chippiness going on and stuff, but you could see that there was a lot of times where Memphis players were clear out flopping, and you look back at some of the replays of that game, and they're just guys are just falling down on Memphis, and they're not even they're barely being touched, but they're falling down and getting fouls called. And then that actually prompted Tennessee's coach Rick Barnes to speak out about that in the post game. And Barnes is the kind of guy that he's the most conservative type of coach that there is. He's all business. He's never gonna call out another team. I've never heard him do that before. He always whenever he talks about another team, he's always oh, they've got great coaches, they've got great players. He always talks about everybody in a good way. So the fact that he called out Hardaway's team for flopping, it was a lot. That spoke volumes to me. And then Hardaway actually came back and said, like, oh, Tennessee's players had like clenched fists trying to like rush our team, but like you watch the replay when that incident happened, like yeah, the bench got up and everything, but they didn't have like clenched fists or anything. He was just making that up. And I think he got exposed for that, for lying, really. And that's going to really add to the rivalry between Memphis and Tennessee, which last year they played in Memphis. So this year they've got them in Tennessee, in Knoxville. So I'm excited for that game. I can't wait to watch that. It's going to be so chippy. It's going to be so, it's going to, these two teams hate each other. So it's going to be interesting. And Memphis, though, has a lot of guys that weren't there for that game last year, though. So whereas Tennessee's still got, they've still got some seniors on their team, but they do have a lot of new faces. But still, and then the Hardaway-Barnes rivalry, too, that's just an interesting rivalry. But I think Memphis is all talk when it comes down to it. I think they're all talk, and I don't think that they're gonna. I think they'll be okay, but they're not gonna surprise you or make it to the Final Four or anything crazy like that. And then this is actually kind of a coincidence here because it has two meanings. So I've got a picture of the SEC logo and I've got the number 7. So I'll talk about the original meaning. So the original meaning I thought was going to be the SEC and how deep the conference is. There's a lot of teams in the SEC that can make the tournament, and there's Florida and Kentucky at the top, but don't count out Auburn, don't count out Tennessee, LSU, those second-tier teams. They're still really good, and they're still probably going to be tournament teams. So I actually think the SEC is going to be the conference that sends the most teams to the tournament. The SEC basketball is at really a high point right now, and it's being a fan of, this is the conference I mainly watch. I'm excited for it because really, apart from Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt did so bad last year they didn't win any games. I'm not sure how much better they're supposed to be, but any team can win any given week. You can see Alabama upset Kentucky, or you can see Missouri beat Florida, or Georgia beat Auburn. There's so many, there's going to be so many good games to watch from this conference when they start playing conference play. So I'm really excited for that. Probably this is what I'm most excited for college basketball is the SEC regular season and see how that shapes out. And I put the number 7 here because originally I was going to predict that a 7 seed or higher is going to make the Final Four, because I don't think that this college basketball season is too top heavy. There's definitely some top teams, but there's not. I think that there's going to be a 7 seed or above to make the Final Four. Last year you didn't see this because it was a lot of chalk last year with teams ranked 1 through 4, all being in the Elite 8 basically. So that's going to be my kind of bold prediction, I guess, is that a 7 seed or better. I can't name you which team it's going to be, but that's just my prediction for that. And then my coincidence when I was looking back at this is, I'm going to predict 7 teams from the SEC make the tournament. So Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, Tennessee, LSU. I think that's the clear 5. I think most people would have those 5 in, but the 2 else I'm going to put in Georgia, and I'm going to put in Alabama. Mississippi State, too, is really hard. Ole Miss, it could even be more than 7. Honestly, it's just going to be interesting to see which of those teams ends up, beating out the others, but it's such a deep conference. Georgia's actually going to be better than they were last year. Mississippi State's still pretty good. Ole Miss, was a team nobody thought was going to be good last year, but they were pretty solid. So, and Alabama's got a new head coach. A lot of people think highly of them. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Missouri's still around. I mean, they didn't have a great year. South Carolina a couple of years ago, made the Final Four push. They've got a great coach. It's just going to be a lot of fun, I think. And yeah, so that's my coincidence with the 7 in the SEC. But I'll let Nate talk about any of these. Is there anything here, Nate, you want to talk about these pictures, or do you have your own stuff to talk about?
Not too much beyond kind of what you're saying. I think I'm a little bit out of all these pictures. I mostly agree. I personally don't follow basketball too closely. I definitely love college basketball, love watching it, but I don't know like as much about each team as I do, with college football or NFL. But so I think most of what you said I pretty much agree with. The only thing I would differ on is the Memphis deal. I'm really interested to see Memphis this year. I don't disagree that it might be overrated, but as I go to UCF, so we play them this year at least once at home. So I'm excited for that game just to kind of get to see them firsthand and see how they look. But I think this team, I'm pretty excited just to see like where they can go with all this potential. The Americans definitely is solid. Gonna be a strong basketball conference this year, and I think that'll help them get some more kind of recognition. Hopefully, if not that I'm rooting for Memphis, but if they do go out and play like a lot of people think they will, having a top 15 team, maybe top 10 team for most of the year should help the conference, especially if Houston and Cincinnati play good like usual. UCF got some question marks, but they're definitely got the chance to hopefully push for a tournament bid again. So I don't have too much like insights wise, but I'm excited for college basketball to be back. I like that. I'm more of a college basketball fan than NBA, so I'm just excited to have some good hoops to watch.
Yeah, same, man. Like, I feel like I might know more about the NBA than college basketball, but I agree with you. Like, if you give me an option of an NBA game or a top 25 college game, I'm gonna watch the college game most times because
Absolutely.
it's more pure, I think, than NBA. It's just NBA. I mean, obviously, there's so much more talented, but you've got the whole school spirit and stuff going on. You don't really see that at all with NBA games. Like, almost honestly, like, unless you're at the game, like, really from the TV version, like, there's nothing about the crowd that stands out to you when you watch a game in the NBA. Whereas, like, in college, you got the bands, you got the mascots on the court. You got all the supporting players and stuff, like the bench warmers on the team, like all getting hyped up and everything. You don't see that in the NBA as much, and the games mean more too since it's a shorter season. And this is like November and December basically going to be the less desirable parts of the season to watch because it's a lot of cupcakes. But at the very beginning of the season, at least, there are a lot of good matchups. Like tonight, Duke beat Kansas, and Kentucky and Michigan State are playing as we speak right now. So those are the top 4 teams right now playing each other. So it's great that you get that going on, but I mean, that's not going to happen every week. And November, December is going to be it's going to be good to see the battles between the conferences and stuff because you mostly play non-conference games. But when we get to January, February, and then really March, that's when we're going to get to see the conference games and see which teams are legit. And it's, conference tournaments are a lot of fun too. Like, as fun as the NCAA tournament is, like, the conference tournaments almost are a much more like realistic goal for teams to win because you don't have to win as many games to win your conference. So that kind of gives every team a shot. I think that's such a cool thing about college basketball is, like, even if you lose every game in the regular season, you still have a chance to make the tournament if you win if you win your conference tournament. Like, that would never happen, but like still, there's the shot. Everybody's playing meaningful basketball, and even if you are a lock, you play for seeding. It's just a lot more fun to watch. But maybe I'll put up a Twitter poll one of these days to see on Twitter what people like more. But I've got a feeling people are going to say NBA because most of my followers are like NBA Twitter people, so they're probably going to say NBA. But personally, give me college, and honestly too, I've got Tennessee and USF to root for, which are interesting teams. And they're good teams too, I think. So it's gonna be fun to watch. And I've got some good teams to watch. Nate, you've got UCF. They're probably still gonna be good. They're gonna be fighting for a bid. So
Yeah.
you're gonna have some good games to go to, as am I. That's something too that like I'm really excited for, is going to watch these games in person, for your school. My goal is to go to at least every conference game. I didn't go to the one tonight, but it was Arkansas Pine Bluff, so like I didn't really need to go to that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely gonna be going to those games, and we might be readjusting the scheduling for these podcasts because due to the games to go and watch and stuff. This is something that we're going to be talking about more and more as the season goes along, but this is just the overall preview of college basketball right here. Very simple, but just some takeaways from some teams I like, some teams I don't like. So I will say, though, I might be a little bit biased being a Tennessee fan, that I said Memphis is going to be bad and Kentucky's not going to win the SEC. Not, I'm not going to claim that there's no bias going on there, but still, that's what makes this game fun, is the rivalries. Too, that's another thing I didn't even mention. Like, the rivalries between these teams is so deep, so historical.
Mm-hmm.
The NBA is hard to get true rivals and stuff. So, yeah, it's gonna be good, man. I'm excited for it. Let's go.
Oh yeah.
So that concludes our podcast for today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't already to one of our sites. Get a friend to subscribe too if you really like this. We would really appreciate that. And hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. For Eric, peace.